And boom! According to that, I am live. Welcome. This is Tokyo Tonight. My name is Hugo Simon. It is Tokyo tomorrow at present. In fact, it is 12:30 p.m. Japan Standard Time. I just realized as I was setting this up that next Sunday in America is daylight saving, which I think means you put the clock forward, which I think means, oh, I'm so confused. It'll either be 11:30 or it will be 1:30 next week. So yes, we'll figure it out when we get to it, but it will be changing again. This kind of reminds me actually why, although originally I like the idea of having the extra hour of sunshine in the evening, changing the clocks twice a year. I mean, just the fact that daylight saving is associated with increased heart attacks because people with fragile hearts like waking up in the morning. The morning is apparently the most common time for people with heart problems to have heart attacks, and daylight saving has a mortality toll. And it was really oriented around, was that right, around agriculture? But in any case, I mean, yes, I've already seen when I was complaining about it on Twitter, some people saying that they dislike how Tokyo doesn't have longer evenings. I mean, Tokyo has pretty long summer evenings. Because its latitude is relatively high. It just has long days, and you're right, they could be longer, and I'd be okay with shifting the time permanently an hour, in order to have longer, day shifted into the evening. But I don't really, I'm not a big fan of, even though I grew up with changing the clocks, and for many years in Japan, I thought Japan should have daylight. Okay, let's see, did that bring it back? Force rebooting streaming software before. Okay, this looks like it's back. I can see myself moving up there. I just force rebooted the streaming software. It was like the streaming software itself, OBS, crashed. But Streamlabs never did that as much as everybody hates on it, and that's partly why I switched to OBS. We'll see if this holds on. At least I didn't have to reboot the whole PC. Anyway. Nice to see people rocking in. I'm here at this time. Next week it'll be an hour different, probably an hour forward, whatever that means. I guess an hour forward means an hour earlier in Japan, like 11:30. I'm confused, but anyway, we'll figure it out. Nice to see people rocking in. We've got Quint Ranked. Smash the like button before you forget. Yes, indeed. I see 5 concurrent viewers, so please. That's pretty much all that I do it for, so I appreciate that. Who else we got in here? We've got Kerberos Tenshi, good to see you. Tokyo Tonight Time. We've got Slake Manson, good evening. Glad that you made it, indeed. We've got Hogwai, spring forward 1 hour. Thank you for that. Yes. And anyone else in here? A Devoid, good morning, Arizona. Ben Duncan, you getting here in the stream dies. It's back. It's back. There was actually another thing I've sort of been obsessing on this week. I think I mentioned last week I had my first New Zealand accent moment, and people talking in the stream how I sound more like a New Zealander lately. I think I figured out the reason. Normally in Japan, when I'm doing this, it's late at night, and like I don't want to wake up my son. So, and it's a small apartment, thin walls. So I always have to speak really softly. Whereas here, it's actually nice. Believe me, even when I do what I consider to be shouting, it's lower volume than many of the people here who talk. Although I think Seattle people are probably quieter people than people in a lot of other parts of America. There are people here who just like boom everything that they say. I'm in a big apartment by myself, other than it echoing, which I find slightly distracting. Yes, because I am more relaxed and because I can actually speak. I'm speaking deliberately clearly, like maybe with a bit more volume than I would even naturally speak, and I guess that brings out the old New Zealand accents a little bit. So yes, enjoy it. Tokyo Tonight from Seattle with extra accent, if that's... you might find that off-putting. I guess the ASMR aspect of talking quietly is probably a little bit gone from this as of late, but I'm free to be the fiery Kiwi that he is here. Yes, well, believe me, if I was going full on with the New Zealand accent, it would be pretty rough. I tell you what, though, there are actually some. I've had people recommend to me content that I didn't realize at first. I later discovered kind of was New Zealand-oriented YouTube content, and there's a lot of good stuff. There's Viva La Dirt League. I don't know if you've seen that channel. It's basically they do a lot of short skits parodying popular video games, and they're really good. Like they're really funny. I don't, it's funny. New Zealanders, I think, socially have an okay, if somewhat dark and cynical sense of humor, but like our TV sense of humor, New Zealand comedies have always been terrible. But yeah, that's it. I mean, we produce good comedians who do well overseas, and Viva La Dirt League is awesome. Also, for the Empire, probably right now the best sort of Star Wars oriented sort of fan videos made with Unreal Engine is awesome. The voice actors are all American voice actors, but it's all produced by a New Zealander, which was like amazing. So yeah, it's kind of funny. The maybe I should be embracing the New Zealandness. I normally don't, but yeah. Anyway, PB asks, have I tried singing in my echoey apartment? Hell yes. I mean, yeah. I've got this massive TV in front of me. Yes, I have been going through. I've been trying and desperately failing to get through singing. I don't know if you, not, it's not even singing is the wrong word. 44 by Logic. I don't know. I've just been obsessed with it lately. I've been listening to it like over and over and over and just keeping up with it. It's probably like the hardest rap track, and it sounds really good, and it's good, but it's like the hardest rap track I think I've ever heard. So it's just I'm trying to see if I can nail that. It'd be good if we get a karaoke night at some point, which probably in around June we'll get. So I've got a few months, which I think I'll need all of if I could ever get that one down. But yeah, I am doing all the things that someone who has not had like real privacy for 13 years and has been in a Japanese apartment, with strict policing internally. All the things that I cannot do in that environment, I have been running, dancing, singing all over the place, and I'm slightly embarrassed to admit it, but I'm admitting it. So what can we do? Shubus is here. Yes, our man from Panama. Good to have you in here. Coffee buddy Shubus indeed. I have to say, a few Seattle updates. The food is like good. I keep like I have memories of crappy food here, and it showed maybe I was just picking the worst stuff. Maybe it was the catering as well at work and so on just wasn't good, but like I'm finding consistently good tasting, healthy, and even when the food isn't healthy, like the fries here. It's a thing with UK with fish and chips, right? And even in Australia and New Zealand, if you go to a crappy fish and chip shop, they've got their oil turned down too low and they don't change their oil enough, and you can kind of tell when you get the soggy chips. Here, the fries are consistently like really good quality, like clearly boiled in good oil at really high temperature. I had some deep fried oysters. Like one of the things I consider to be best about Japan, and one of my favorite foods to eat in Japan is kaki fry, deep fried oysters, like Japanese style. So I tried in Bainbridge Island today. I ran a 10K this morning, and in the afternoon I popped over to Bainbridge Island just to try out the ferry and check it out, and I had some seafood. I had some deep fried oysters over there. They were enormous and delicious. Like everything is good. So no, I'm taken with the food, and I haven't put on weight. I mean, because I can choose to eat lots of veggies and so on, I can control. I guess as well, being on my own as well, I can control my portions. I've got tons of Ziploc containers. I'm chopping everything in half, and I'm exercising a bunch. The other thing I might have mentioned, last week. So last like Friday, I strained a calf muscle. It turned out it wasn't pulled, but I was worried. Depending on the amount of damage, that can take up to months to fix. And even a medium sort of a strain on the muscle, like a pulled muscle, can take like multiple weeks. And I'd signed up for a 10K this morning, and I knew it would be like the dumbest thing to run a 10K, like especially without any preparation. But I was kind of balancing off between, because I was really fit like until then. I was exercising every day, so I was kind of trading off. Do I train a little bit so that I'm a little bit warmed up and fit before I run a 10K, or do I do nothing in order to let my calf muscle like recover as much as possible, rather than I could have actually injured myself even worse if I had done a light run 2 days ago and it had gotten tight and then I ran again today. So I did nothing. My training program was eating bonbons and sleeping. On the day I didn't run seriously. I was in actually the lead pack group by expected time. But someone who introduced me to the Hot Chocolate Seattle run, who's into running, and suggested that I sign up. I ran with her, and it was a pretty gentle pace, which made it very comfortable, and it was great. I came out, I had no problems at all, so I'm going to get back into running, which I've been looking forward to doing. And yeah, it was a great way. I got to run through the streets and on the highway and everything around Seattle. So I actually a great day today. So I am enjoying the Seattle life. Not gonna lie, people are like nice, friendly. Again, it's part of maybe being from a smaller city that people are just they engage with you more. But I like all the interactions with people. So yeah, I'm having a good time. Anyway, back into the comments. Fresh cuppa, indeed. The coffee here is also, of course, famously good, and I'm finding that to be true. So yeah, definitely a lot of Asian foods. I'm really appreciating that there's like Vietnamese food everywhere, which I think is possibly the best type of Asian food and possibly the best type of food. Full stop. I mean, when you combine really good Southeast Asian food with French food, like kind of what their colonial influence was, yeah, it's like you've got the best food cultures in the world merging into like a super food culture. So I definitely appreciate, yeah, all the food here. And just the fact that everyone, like people are healthy. You don't see obese people like you see elsewhere in America or in Australia. So, yeah, healthy food is available, and there's healthy people to serve who don't want to eat crappy food. So it's pretty good. So yeah. By the way, if you want to direct a question to me, just to avoid me like reading one by one, remember to say my name, say Hiko Simon in the chat, and it'll flash up orange, and I'll pay special attention to it. But just quickly scanning through, so Hogwai, Ben Duncan, PB, I think I've said hello to everybody. Odie Jr., good to see you. What's up indeed? Bada boom. Fresh Cuppa and 3D Cow, Vancouver greater than Seattle, says 3D Cow. I was under that impression, but I felt like I'd always given Seattle a bad rap because I had only seen like 300 square meters of Seattle for work every time I came. I just stayed beside the office. So I've been meaning to get around and see more of the surroundings of Seattle. I still haven't gotten out of Seattle into nature yet. Like I had another New Zealand friend here who went skiing today. What I appreciate about when I was in Vancouver, the downtown is much nicer than the downtown of Seattle. But also, I spent every day going out into nature and doing things around Vancouver, which I haven't really done in Seattle. So I'm looking forward to doing that. It's still a bit cold at the moment. I had a very, very positive impression of Vancouver, but it made me want to test out more, give Seattle more of a run. And I've been impressed by Seattle. But yeah, I certainly appreciate what you mean. Vancouver is also great. And I'm hoping I might even get across the border at some point. I got my driver's license this week, by the way. Again, if you have a Japanese driver's license, even if you're like not a Japanese citizen, yeah, you just rock up to the consulate. They give you a translation. You rock up to the DMV, and within 10 business days, they'll email you a Washington license, which I still get nervous crossing the road because I look in the wrong direction. And there are some wacky road rules here, like even on a red light, you can turn left. Apart from the fact, turning corners, of course, I always intuitively lean towards the wrong side of the road, even on the e-bikes. I hit straight into oncoming traffic. And at stop signs, like everybody stops, and then everyone's momentarily confused about giving way. Oh, another thing about Seattle that was kind of interesting. Whenever I try to cross the road, like not at a traffic light, typically, to minimize your time on the road, you try to time your walk across so that you're going just behind a car that's coming, right? So when a car comes, you start walking with the understanding they're going to go through and you're going to sort of walk behind safely. But in Seattle, even like on big roads, like on Denny, cars just stop. As soon as you put one foot on the road, everyone stops like dead in the middle of a busy road and says, "Oh, go through." And that yeah, I think that increases the risk of a serious accident. It's friendly, it's nice, but yes, I've learned to actually let the car go and then run extra fast, which is less safe, but it stops polite people getting me killed. So yeah, anyway, lots of fun little interesting things. I'll probably talk more about that during the show, but let's jump into the topics. This week I had a really busy week with work, like really using the brain a lot. Yeah, I slept very well this week. I wasn't doing a lot of Twitter. I am actually, as part of my daily routine, I'm watching NHK 7 o'clock news with breakfast every morning here in America. So it's kind of funny. I'm keeping up with the NHK 7 p.m. news better than I keep up with it actually in Japan. But even there hasn't really been a lot of like particular standout news. I've just been catching up today mostly because I haven't been tweeting. Been going through my very backed up RSS feeds, and I've picked out some topics so I can go through that, but there's not a lot there. So I'm thinking we'll have some time to spare. I also got some parts to be able to hook up the iPad to be able to like record music live, but I haven't had a chance to actually set that up and try it, so I won't be able to do that tonight. But remember, as always, if you've got a question for me, a topic request for me, or you just want to say hello and grab my attention, say Hiku Simon, it will flash orange. And with that, I'm going to jump into the topics. First topic is just right now, the app that I'm using, Flipboard, is actually now doubling down on having Mastodon as a source. I've stopped using Mastodon pretty much. I just found the engagement there, like double posting everything. I had some people comment that yes, I was just posting news articles, which I often trigger interesting discussions over on Twitter. But here, on Mastodon, nothing was really happening with them, and some people said, yeah, it just looks like a bot, which I'm sympathetic to. But in the end of the day, it resulted in like, yeah, if people are only expressing annoyance. I just don't post on Mastodon. I'll post that the live stream is on for people to know. But that said, of course, with Twitter left and right starting to cut third-party apps compatibility, that's starting to happen. It's understandable that sites like Mastodon that rely, like Flipboard, that rely on Twitter integration as a way. I mean, like I did with this, the links on my tweets, the news stories that I put together these magazines with. So yeah, Twitter suddenly breaks that. Mastodon is a sort of decentralized social network, and is in that regard pretty much unbreakable. So understandable that just making sure that they never get cut off. And I guess if that were to happen, if Flipboard were to get cut off, I probably might post more in Mastodon. Although I really want to be where my followers are, and there's 13,000 on Twitter. So that's the main reason that I'm there. But it's easy to stand on the sidelines and throw peanuts. I've never actually had to run a multi-billion-dollar social networking service myself. But as someone who loves Twitter, I'll repeat, I just want it to work. I'm sympathetic that it doesn't really make a lot of money for its size and its influence. It makes no money. Which again is also why in the hell would Musk pay $44 billion for it and then, be desperate but he's monetizing it in ways that I think kill what's good about it. Killing the golden goose that lays the eggs, as they say. So, I really hope he doesn't screw it up. And he's doing some things that are good, but a lot of things seem to just stand out as being like, is that a good idea? So, yeah. Red light can turn right. Sorry, left. That's right. Left is the other side of the road. I'm thinking Japanese turning still. So that's right. You can turn right. But that gets tricky when you have pedestrians crossing. Pedestrians have right of way, but I've been like honked crossing when the pedestrian thing was on from a car that wanted to turn right through a red light. I'm pretty sure, he was the a-hole, but again, the situation wouldn't arise if it was just a simple go when the traffic light is green. But it kind of makes sense in small towns, but I'm not sure it makes sense in cities. Just the typical ongoing story, nothing much to comment other than Japan just, for the first time, like since 1935 or something, Japan had the lowest number of births and highest number of deaths. So even with all the projected collapsing of the population, it still is happening faster than expected. And Japan is indeed the global canary in the coal mine. Most developing countries are going through this, but at a rate 10 to 15 years sort of behind Japan. And Japan doesn't really have answers to this at the moment. So that's a thing that's happening. Just another thing. I shared my personal opinion about this online, and it's just kind of silly. Of course, there are mainly Unification Church, crazy, Korean Christian, quasi-Christian cult groups that have paid for influence in the LDP to block attempts to recognize LGBT people as equal in terms of marriage rights, and preventing discrimination against them. Because Japan has no Christian tradition of demonizing LGBT people or even considering sodomy to be like religiously sinful, there's just no again, in Japanese culture, there are conservatives who, again, see it as deviant in the sense of, not the expected normal thing from society. But Japanese culture and history has just consistently been that, so long as you have this weird paradox where you'll have a lot of, traditionally, you hear that the people who go to Nichome, Shinjuku Nichome, the gay district in Tokyo, often have families and are married and so on because they're doing the expected social life thing. But so long as they do all their other obligations and are discreet, there's no real taboo. Well, I mean, it's kind of a taboo, I suppose, but it's basically, it's more, that people are sort of free on their spare time, to go and have their affairs with same sex. So yeah, yeah, I don't know. For me, the fact that the prime minister is still defending a small fringe that's influenced by a cult that sort of is holding out that, oh no, we don't want to ban, our right to discriminate against LGBT people. Like, why would you want the right to discriminate against people? Like, and recognizing marriage equality as well. It's making the prime minister look again when even conservative polls like by the Sankei show that like more than 60% of people who read the conservative Sankei newspapers don't see any problem with recognizing marriage equality. Why the prime minister isn't just doing the easy thing and just slapping through the law to recognize marriage equality and prohibiting discrimination, and is like dithering and saying, well, it's the status quo ban on same-sex marriage is not discrimination, when being challenged. Isn't the current state untenable because it's discrimination? Being asked that, he responds, no, 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 it's not discrimination. But, again, why go to the trouble of looking bad trying to explain a status quo that most of Japanese society, even conservative society, thinks should be fixed? It just strikes me as one of those things where it would just be much easier and simpler to just do the right thing and fix it than it is to stand there making excuses for not doing anything, which makes you look like you're not, you're on the other side. So yeah, yeah. And in terms of like, yeah, it doesn't make sense to me. To the extent that, to me, marriage is a form of contract. It's something that basically adults with the ability to consent and decide to do something together between, selling a house or buying a car or, it's the same thing. Consenting adults, the idea that there is actually court precedent in some cases in America against this, and in New Zealand, I think we had where judges would say that, well, the purpose of marriage is biological, it's for having kids, which raises the question, well, if you have infertile couples, then should their marriages also be prohibited? It's silly. It's just something that's an institution that we recognize consenting adults are able to do, and why, if gay people are able to buy cars, why can't they marry? It's inconsistent. It's just illogical to me. So yeah, the PM trying to defend a status quo, which, yeah, it's been the status quo for ages, but why try to defend it when it's wrong? Doesn't make sense to me. Anyway, so Quinn Rankin, is there much blackmail in Japan? You do hear about blackmail. You hear about all kinds of scams that gangsters and, get into, and I'm sure that same-sex related blackmail is part of it. Another reason to remove the whole discrimination thing, but you occasionally hear of people who run like prostitution services will take photos of the person and then try to blackmail them for extra money and stuff like that. You do hear, things like that. Again, really occasionally, and it's really sort of tabloid material. But again, even that you don't hear so much because remember, although straight sex is bad, when I say straight sex, like full sex, actual, and it's kind of funny under the Japanese like laws against prostitution. If anything is okay except for male bits, woman bits, direct penetration sex. Anything other than that, including same sex, is actually not explicitly illegal. They actually describe exactly what's illegal, which means that sex services in Japan are for the most part entirely illegal. So there's no need to go to like dodgy places if that's what you want to do. So even then, blackmail exists, but it's kind of rare because honestly, there's so many other safe ways to go about it. So yeah, it exists. You hear about it, but I don't think it's a big thing. Sadiq Hakangur, it's good to see you. And a message retracted, but good to see you in there nonetheless. Hogwai. I always say Hogwai. It's Hoigwai, isn't it? I don't know how to pronounce that properly. Squeaky wheel syndrome. They yell really loud about it, and politicians pay attention for no really good reason. Yeah, hello Seattle, hello Florida. Victor down there in Florida with you at the moment. I don't know if you bump into him in Florida. I don't know. He's probably going to be holding up a 7-Eleven with an alligator. I think that's what people. If I read The Onion, I think that's what people down there do all the time. Photos from Seattle. I actually went out to I got invited out to a corporate box. It was awesome for at Lumen Field, which is where the Seattle Seahawks played. I was kind of bummed out I didn't get to watch an NFL game. It's actually, I can't believe how short the NFL season is. Although I guess given how how it basically all the players are like having repetitive car crashes, I guess they can't have a season with too many games. But yeah, same field that they play the NFL. They have the Seattle soccer team, and I went and watched the Seattle Sounders play Real Salt Lake. It was a great, yeah, it was a great atmosphere, a great field. It was a relatively easy win by the Sounders. The quality I'm used to watching. If I watch soccer, I watch Premier League, UK Premier League, and the level is quite different. But the fact that the game was unbalanced, which made it kind of a bit of a goal. Well, there were only two goals actually went in, but there were a lot of shots, so it was pretty much a lopsided game, which made it fun to watch. It was a great night out. I loved it, and it was kind of funny because even though it's a soccer game, you have the full marching bands and the American anthem before the game, and yeah, it was cool. Just a bit of culture, so very much enjoyed that. Um, what else we got here? Yeah, no other comments. There's someone. The only question tonight is there much blackmail in Japan? I mean, I suppose. I don't know. I don't know. You hear about it occasionally, but not very often. There's me today. So I ran super slow by my standards. I was actually aiming to run slow. I was aiming for 7 minutes 30. I kind of pushed a little bit harder than I should. Also, it's supposed to be a 10K. I don't know if they're having problems with their metric conversions or if my watch needs recalibration or something. But yeah, came up 200 meters short. Doesn't matter. Anyway, I was just glad to get through it with my calf muscle not completely rupturing. And that being the case, I'm going to get back into running now. Also, it's starting to get warmer. We've had a couple of weeks of snow and a horrible cold here, actually, much colder than I'm used to. So yeah, now it's becoming spring-ish. There are now cherry blossom buds and stuff around Seattle. There's a lot of that, so I'm looking forward to running some more and actually doing some more races. But I was actually in a group set for a 4 minute 30 pace, so that didn't quite work out. But it was a great run. Um, what else we got here? This is looking at the news from tonight. I mean, I'm tired of talking about stuff with Korea, honestly, because it's just Charlie Brown trying to kick the football over and over. And maybe that's being too sympathetic to Japan, but I started out this whole thing, I think, where everyone starts out. Japan was the horrible aggressor, colonizer country. That even their best excuse and justification for why they colonized Korea had nothing to do with Korea. Their kind of best excuse was that if we had to do it because otherwise Russia was going to do it, because Russia had Dalian, Port Arthur, and there was a fear from Japan that Russia was going to occupy the whole Korean peninsula. So we have to invade them first to save them from being invaded. That's like the best logic Japan ever came up with for the colonial period in Korea. So yeah, of course, everything Japan shouldn't have been there in the first place. Every bad thing that happened, even if it's even though a lot of academics and right wing people in Japan argue a lot of the details, and indeed there are a lot of collaborators on the Korean side, which itself is a huge source of still mess over on the Korean side. Yeah, you start with the default position. Japan bad, Korea good. Japan wants compensation, give Korea compensation. When you get into the details, of course, Japan's paid compensation and apologized multiple times. But, it's politically, particularly in domestic politics in Korea, good to keep up the narrative that Japan is still the boogeyman. And to promptly forget money paid and apologies given over and over and over and over and over. And there's also this recurring pattern that it is the right-wing parties, like the right-wing party of the current president, Yoon Suk Yeol. His party always does deals with Japan, where Japan apologizes and pays money and tries to tidy things up, and they say, historic moment, forgiven forever. And then the left-wing parties, which are defined politically within Korea as always just like bashing Japan to the maximum, and using Japan to hold out as, see, we should be more friendly with North Korea because look at, the right-wingers want to be friends with our forever enemy, Japan. And they toss out all the deals, and you're back to starting all over again. And the new right-wing government, as always, says, hey, we want to be friends with Japan again. So to their credit, they're trying to fix a problem caused by their courts, which said it was against public policy for the diplomatic relations treaty between Japan and Korea to be upheld. And even though there's a prohibition on Japan being liable for war-related labor, that it's already paid compensation for, and that Korea's sort of written off under its diplomatic relations treaty, the court said, yeah, that's against public policy, so Japan still has to pay again, double jeopardy. And the Korean government's resolved it, and what they've offered to do is they've said that they will pay all the court cases that are found against Japanese companies, and the Japanese government, the Korean government, will pay. Which is what the Japanese government position is that under the treaty, the Korean government has to sort out all compensation claims. It has to handle them itself. The Korean government said it would be really nice if Japan would contribute to the fund set up by the Korean government to pay the war victims on a voluntary basis and not linked to any legal liability. It would show that Japan's really sincere about wanting to resolve this. This happened, of course, with the comfort women, and when the left-wing government came in, they actually shut down the fund, which was full of Japanese government donations for comfort women, because they didn't want to let go of the ability to claim and push for a new deal, which means that these comfort women who are now dying of old age are never going to get compensation. This is the money that's been set aside is not getting paid out. I fear that will happen in this case as well, that the money's going to get frozen when the domestic government there changes. But that said, listen, I do wish for Japan and Korea to be able to move forward and have good relations, and I see from the Japan side that the Japanese government is sincerely trying to do the right thing to settle this over and over and over and over. And they didn't want to go down this. This was seriously Lucy holding out the football, saying just this one more time. If you just pay money and apologize, just this one more time, we can finalize this once and for all. Holds out the football. And the Japanese government didn't want any part of it. They just sort of ignored them for a year. But to the Korean government's credit, they kept at it, and they've presented a reasonable solution. It's not that I don't trust the current Korean government. It's that I don't trust the next Korean government. And I'll emphasize, Korea doesn't have to forgive Japan. Korea can hold on to this grudge forever. It's entitled to. It's not under any obligation to forgive Japan and let it all go. But I do think that if they do government-to-government deals to resolve things, they should hold up their end of what's agreed. They don't have to do a deal, but they're the ones begging for a deal right now. And and the point is that if you do a deal on this, it means that the countries can start to be friends and cooperate, and I think that would be really good. But it never happens. So on this, it looks again like historical resolution between Korea and Japan again, but we've been here before, so we'll see what happens, but I do hope it works out. Back into the chat. Quint Ranked, if the women don't get compensation, the SK government will blame Japan for it. Well, exactly, or specifically when it's a left-wing government, when it's a specifically politically anti-Japanese, ideologically anti-Japanese left-wing government, they're going to cite that. And you see, Japan never paid any money to the comfort women, even though they did in 1995, they did in 2003, they did in 2018, and every time the Korean government acknowledged it as a final settlement and then tossed it out. So, but that's right. That's just how domestic. It's like as we'll get to, it's like Democrats and Republicans talking about masks. Japan is just not a rational subject of foreign policy debate in Korea. It's an emotional, the ties between history and nationalism and political ideology. And ironically, the nationalists, the ethno-nationalists are the left-wingers in Korea. The ones who say we should be sticking to our own blood and DNA in the North and kicking out the Americans and the Japanese, foreigners. That's left wing. It's really weird to me, but I do hope that they can somehow move a little bit past it. We'll see. They don't have to forgive Japan. They don't have to do it. But if they are going to do a deal, I hope it works. Those are enormous deep fried oysters that I had today on Bainbridge Island, which is about 40 minutes off the coast of Seattle. It's a really nice little sort of village island. Apparently it's super expensive to live there. It's there are people at work who commute by ferry from there, and it's kind of a different world. It feels like Sorrento, where I grew up in Australia. Just a very, very picturesque, small sort of village beside a ferry terminal. Walked around. I mean, there wasn't a lot in terms of shops, and I think in terms of getting around, I'd have to rent a car and put it on the ferry. You can't rent cars over there at the moment, so yeah, to get around properly, I do want to go see. I do want to go see some Native American reservations and check out the indigenous culture. Where, to me, it's so weird that Seattle, or is it Seattle or Washington State, has like a Nordic history museum. It kind of reflects, again, maybe just how white the state is. That like it's easier to find, an archaeological museum dedicated towards Norwegians and Swedes than it is towards the Native Americans who actually live there. I'm not interested, honestly, that much in colonial history, like 18th century, and it's kind of I did the Seattle Underground tour, but yeah, I find it much more interesting to understand the 15 10 to 15,000 year history that preceded the last 200 years that that gets ignored. There's fascinating ties. The whole Northwest, including, of course, there's no real, it's an artificial separation between Canada and America in this regard. They traded with the Ainu in Japan, like thousands of years. So you talk again about of course, forgetting the fact that that humans walked over the land bridge that came across from Alaska, and people debate, well, okay, but who other than the people who walked across were the first to discover America? And people say the Vikings were there in the 1300s or whatever, ahead of Columbus. It appears that Ainu were like going back and forth, like basically from 10,000 BC. They just didn't walk over. They stayed on the Japan side and they kept trading. They've found like the greenstone type jade artifacts and stuff like that. There are connections all over the place America was never undiscovered, at least on the western side. I find all of that. I find the human, anthropology of it, and the exchange and the kind of history, how many waves crossed over, and what were the differences and so on, and what were the cultures established here like. Yeah, I find that far more interesting. So I do want to get over to Bainbridge Island and check out. I don't want to go to the casino, but I do want to go over and just see some, see if I can see some actual Native American museums, personally. But yeah. Quentin Rankin, Japan should demand to be able to pay the comfort woman directly. Yeah, they had all of that. Well, yeah, that was also tricky. The last deal, I mean, honestly, the comfort woman issue is one that you just can't go through because the comfort women themselves have factions which themselves are looked after by different support groups. The support groups of which, some of which are vociferously political, and have different levels of demand. Some willing to go along with the government settlement, some wanting, some being middle of the road, and some being that they want Abe to come and personally grovel at their feet one by one. I.e., they don't want a settlement; they just want to bash on this. And the comfort women are paid by some of the political support groups, so who make money off donations, given because Japan doesn't pay compensation. So in a way, cynics in Japan say cynically that the comfort women issue is deliberately perpetuated by many of these activist groups on the left because they raise so much money. They're actually money-making organizations based on donations, based on perpetuating the idea that Japan is not paying. So these are the groups that successfully blocked the deal after Japan paid money on it. It's just not possible, and the same groups would stop the women, the comfort women, from accepting the money. Many of these groups said that they would reject the payments made through the Korean government and so on. It's not possible to resolve. It really isn't. The war labor is slightly more interesting and different. But yeah, like I say. Kerberos Tenshi, I think it's how horses actually came to America, through the Bering Strait, and then towards North America. I mean, makes sense, right? I mean, it was connected to Eurasia, and 10,000 years isn't that long ago. This is just what I love about this whole topic, like in terms of like generations and, yeah, it's a super, like humans have only been around for a super short time, and within that short time that humans have been around, they've only been outside of Africa for like 1% of that time. It's not that long ago. So yeah, that I find far more interesting anyway. John Carlo Lanoy, good to have you in here, a man from the Philippines. Good to have you here in the chat. What is this topic? Japan is, oh yeah, so this guy Stephen Givens, who I don't know, I know nothing about him. I've heard other foreign lawyers in Tokyo claim to know him and, poo-poo his articles, his columns that he writes in the Nikkei, giving his opinions on the Japanese economy and so on. he wrote a piece that I skimmed over just before the show saying that Japan is producing more lawyers than it knows what to do with. And saying that Japan's gone from, of course, famously having a 1 to 2% pass rate of the bar exam, like fixed. So even if everybody got 98% on the exam, there was no pass score. They would literally make it so that only 1% of people could pass, which meant that, yeah, when I worked in law firms, some of the lawyers there, who are better trained lawyers than a lot of lawyers who work in Western law firms, were like taking their 10th shot at the bar exam. It was like my cousin, everyone's like doing my cousin Vinny or something. So, yeah, I forget what year. It was like around 2010 or something like that. They changed the rules to basically allow 25% of people to pass. And they made it much easier. They made the exam easier to pass because it was recognized that most companies, now that Japanese companies are doing all this M&A and having all this patent litigation, and engaging more in international trade, most Japanese companies, don't have lawyers in-house. And law firms themselves have such limited registers of lawyers that they can't handle all of the work that is needed for Japanese economic activity. So the government decided that, yeah, we should actually make the exam passable. And when they did that, it was kind of interesting. Working in a law firm at the time, when Japanese lawyers would introduce themselves, they'd emphasize that they were admitted to the bar before the year when they made the exam easier, which is kind of understandable. But yeah, so my observation is that, yes, it did allow more Japanese lawyers to pass the bar. And that meant that, for example, the big mega Japanese law firms, the big four, Mori Hamada, Anderson Mori, Nagashima Ono, and Nishimura Asahi, they all, of course, grew their whole corporate law things, their lawyer, battery chicken farm offices of lots of young, stressed out, working to death lawyers. But yeah, he's sort of arguing that now the problem is that these people can't get jobs in law firms. But to me, that was never the problem. The problem is that, you have a lot of companies. Again, you don't have a lot of in-house counsel who do a lot of the regular work that companies need them to do. And, even for me, hiring lawyers to work in-house inside a company, you can never find enough. And it's still people, still feel compelled to stay in law firms and so on. So he's saying that now there's an oversupply of lawyers. I've never felt that. As someone who actually hires Japanese lawyers, I don't see the problem that he describes, where he says that now there are all of these destitute qualified lawyers who can't find jobs. I still observe a supply problem, actually a shortage rather than an oversupply. And remember, America, everybody's like a lawyer in America, and again, so Japan's trading with America, there are lots of legal interactions, there's lots of contracts, there's lots of deals done, there's lots of M&A. So, yeah, Japan's always been at a disadvantage not having, people who can, stand up the other side of that work. So, which is great for me. It means I get a job. But I don't observe the shortage that he observes. Maybe he's got a narrow perspective because he looks at it from the private practice. He looks at it from a law firm, only perspective. And Japanese law firms are their own weird, separate world. But in society, again, access to justice has always been a problem. People able to, bring cases, for example. The shortage of lawyers just meant that people, without the funds to bring, lawsuits, even when they were needed, the lawyers with the time weren't around, and the prices were high and inaccessible. So access to justice was a huge problem. But yeah, the government's thing was the need for them for the economy. And again, not saying that every society should have as many lawyers as America does, but Japan is so far from that. I think it still is in the shortage area. So I don't know. I don't know Stephen Gibbons, so I'm not going to say anything about him. But I disagree with him in this particular case anyway, just because I want to be able to hire more people. So yeah, the Linksy project, good to see you there. As long as JP doesn't become like the US and become sue happy, it should be a win, Japan is so far from being litigation, vexatious litigation prone like America. Yeah, if we get like within 1% of that, I think we can reevaluate. But I exactly agree. It's actually, believe it or not, in spite of the stereotypes, which I think are generated by the many oversupply possible lawyers in America, I'd like to think that we help people. when people have problems, people come to legal professionals, and our job is to simplify and help resolve people's problems, and yeah, having people who can help you fix problems and make your lives easier, I don't see that as a bad thing. But of course, that's not really the traditional stereotype, I know. Better call Saul. Better call Hiko. Yes, better call me, please. But anyway, apparently, yeah, some people saw this earlier this week. Again, why, when they do all of these security theater, like they call the media to come and watch us doing security drills to show how safe we are for protecting dignitaries. They had the special police, the sort of secret service of Japan, doing what looked like a flash mob dancing scene, like multiple people like grabbing knife attackers at the same time. And for some reason, the Japan Self-Defense Forces wanted to prove how great their security at their bases is. If you've ever been on a military base, you go through the gate, and the American bases, they practically strip search you and your car. They inspect like mirrors under the car and everything. It's pretty thorough. But yeah, you go into any base, you always have to go through a gate. There's security guards there. They check you out, and they have guns, and they are typically allowed to shoot you. If they feel like it. Probably not exactly like that in Japan, but they wanted to demonstrate that they were ready to deal with any security threat in Japan. And when they thought about all the security threats, which, Russian spies or North Korean infiltrators, no, they decided the biggest problem is, of course, prank YouTubers who would actually be carrying a real bomb, because YouTube pranksters are serious, trying to get through a gate and get onto a base, and showing. Basically, they would sit there and just manage to block them from getting through the security checkpoint. Again, I mean, if this scenario would ever happen in real life, I'm not for like shooting people, but it does strike me that that would be the easiest solution in this particular case, and I don't really see that anyone would see it as a problem. I mean, why not? They might as well just make this firing range practice, from my perspective. So again, I mean, I think this is it almost would be better if they actually hired. I don't know if they use the same actors who put on the animal costumes and pretend to be escaped animals at zoos. That'd be kind of cool that they get to do a more variety of roles. They can put on their resume. They've played lion, tiger, and annoying YouTuber. And yeah, maybe they'll get on the news for that. Who knows? But yes. Quinn Rankin, not quite solving people's problems, solving your clients' problems. Yeah, I get what you mean. But again, the way I work, and I'm lucky. I'm not a litigator. I'm not a hired fighter per se. I'm not there to screw everybody else. But even in Japan, the Japanese legal system is so oriented where you are forced to settle and mediate with people. Having a lawyer who's oriented towards just fighting is terrible, because you'll never settle, and the judge will hate you and will actually find against you if it looks like you're not trying to settle, even when your case is strong. So actually in Japan, you need mediators. And look, as an in-house lawyer, my job is just to get to the right answer. There's different attitudes to working as an in-house lawyer, and maybe this is talking shop a little bit too much. I don't talk about my current job, but I've done this for a few jobs now. There are in-house lawyers who see their job as being to get the best deal for their company and for their side. And no, I think the best thing is to get the best thing for the business, which is where you want deals where everyone feels like they've got a good deal, which means that you try to do right by the customer so that they trust you, so that when you tell them something, they don't think you're trying to pull one over. And yeah, I've had good friends and work relationships with people on other sides of negotiations all the time, because if you show them that you're working in good faith, then you can actually you can't solve problems butting heads with people, and that's what we do. Our job is to figure out, you've got round hole and square peg, and what do you do, and you figure it out. And that's why I particularly like working in companies with engineers, because they approach it differently to really salesy companies. But anyway, no. So I think lawyers are good people, and I make sure. Well, bad ones exist, but I make sure I only hire good ones as much as possible. Kenneth Tan, much love from the Philippines. Much love to the Philippines. Great to have you in the chat there. Have some adobo on me, please. Might be a bit early in the day there, but yes. Good to have you there in the chat. Tim the Asian Ink. laughing, possibly about my slightly inflammatory YouTuber comments, I suspect. Justin Connolly, good to see. I mean, they don't want any more Logan Paul incidents, no. Yeah, I don't even know what they were trying to do, honestly. I think they might as well have just had like someone in a lion costume trying to get onto a base. They could have just, simplified. Kerberos, Quentin Rankid, we have a concept in the West called a jury trial, now used for trial by jury. Yeah, they have trial by jury in Japan, but I'm not convinced that jury trials are a good way of doing things either. I mean, that's, again, mostly for sort of criminal. I know that they even have it for civil cases, I think, which is just weird to me. But yeah, I know that you have that. It seems like a terrible pain in the ass to have to give up your life and be roped into that, but yeah. Kubra Stenshi, I think the JSTF doesn't need to hire people to play annoying YouTubers. They can just hire annoying YouTubers. I must admit, it would be kind of cool. I mean, Hikaking. Uh, yeah, I mean, Hikaking doesn't really qualify, I guess. They're the people like that high school kid who was like licking all the stuff at the rotation at the rotating sushi. Get that kid and use rubber bullets. you know, just my suggestion for the Japan Self Defense Forces. John Carlo, Illinois, visited Seattle a few years ago. Seahawks Stadium, CenturyLink Field, and now the Lumen Field. How am I there? I am good, and Lumen Field was awesome. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. Well, this is interesting. I just came across this as I was setting up the show. Apparently, at a which one was it? This was which convenience store was it? In an Osaka Lawson store, and the staff, clearly handwritten note, the staff at a store, apparently they were getting annoyed that foreigners were pointing at the steamed meat buns, the Nikumans, and they were pointing saying, give me that one. And the staff were putting one in the pack and they were coming back and saying, you gave me the wrong one. So blaming this on foreigners not like being clear enough, they put a note that says, to our esteemed customers of foreign nationality, please, it is forbidden to say this. Please say, I want a steamed beef bun. So that they pick the right one. Basically, transferring their mistake, picking out the wrong one or not checking properly to, blaming it on foreigners, not explaining enough. This was photographed and shared with the Lawson head office, which promptly said, please get that sign down. Because, of course, you think about just the staff at, shops. Again, this is just the typical, that when they have a problem, they just presume it's the foreigner's fault. Japanese point into that one all the time. I mean, I think humans do that all the time. So when they screw up that one instruction, the idea that, and the fact that the instruction is aimed only at foreigners, as if Japanese are better at pointing or something. So yeah, that went down like a bucket of cold vomit, as I believe they say in Australia, and is done. So yes, indeed. Hoigwai, we've got, not in the US. They would rather have blood on the floor than genuinely negotiate for an equitable solution. There are cases like that. Believe me, again, it's not, I think the stereotypes about American lawyers are also a little bit out of control. Some of my best friends are American lawyers. They're nice people. They exist. There are just so many of them. There are bad ones as well, I guess. But yeah, the idea that it's actually a part of ethics, like as a lawyer in most states in America, that you not only have to advocate for your client, you have to advocate zealously and trust that the referee judge will sort it out so you can just like say whatever you want, which is just stupid. I mean, if again, I think you're trying to get the best outcome, and sometimes the best outcome isn't by being an a-hole to everybody. Sometimes it's by actually being reasonable. But anyway, that's just a philosophy thing. Interesting one here. I just noticed this tonight. This is from Ars Technicus on American blog. They're still debating this. Do masks work? Apparently, this is like a charge, this is like asking, are you a communist to an American? And take sides. And so half will say proudly that they are, and half will say, I would never, better dead than red, or wearing a mask. Again, I've lived in Japan for too long. People wear masks in all kinds of situations, and I mean, I've never seen the scientific data for it. It just makes sense, right? That you block the germs if you are emitting germs, or if other people are emitting germs and you want to protect yourself. Yeah, wearing a mask can't hurt. I mean, you could wear stockings over your head. You could wear a brown paper bag. It probably has some kind of measurable benefit, of filtering to some extent. And it's just common sense that people do it. People used to do it for air pollution. Now, not so much for air pollution. They'll do it now for pollen. They'll do it if you've got the flu. They've got it if flu is going around and you're worried about catching it on crowded trains. People just wear masks all the time when it makes sense, and it's just accepted common sense that it's better to wear one than not to wear one, and so what's the big deal? And the fact that it's even, I mean, I realize the way that the Americans messaged, where again, because the whole Dr. Fauci worried that if people rushed masks, like indeed at the start of the pandemic, there was a rush on masks in Japan and they were hard to find. And the fear that the people would hoard medical masks and stop doctors and medical institutions being able to have them. So they deliberately false message saying you don't need masks, it's okay, in order to, prevent a supply shortage happening. Then seeding the idea that masks aren't necessary and then changing their mind on the advice. And then people say, oh, why did Dr. Fauci lie? When, yeah, he was doing what politicians do. He was deliberately lying for a strategic end. But once he lied, then people didn't trust anything about masks anymore. It's just purely, yeah, like I said, it's just purely psychology, physics, biology, behavior. It's just like, I still can't believe that vaccinating or mask wearing is a political topic here. Now that said, I'm not wearing masks at all here in Seattle. Like sometimes on the bus if everyone's wearing them on the bus, but other than that, but if I were to catch COVID, and I really don't want to, but if I were, if I was around people that had recently caught it, or if I felt that I was in danger, I wouldn't hesitate to put a mask on, like I did on the airplane. And also, if I had it, I would wear a mask. Well, one, I wouldn't go out, but if I had to go out, I would wear a mask out of consideration to other people to do something to minimize the risk of me spreading it. And that's it. I mean, that's just Japanese common sense. I don't know how it's up for debate, but it is up for debate. Again, being in a relatively liberal city, Seattle, people don't really debate this so much, but you can sense the tension that people feel towards people who have different political views on anything. But it's kind of funny, like masks are like grouped in with Black Lives Matter, and critical race theory teaching in schools. It's all put into the same bucket. That how could you even question this from Seattle, where they feel like there are people who are like opposed to science across America, and they and they all need to be cancelled. Again, how like wearing a mask falls into that, I don't understand, but it is a thing. 3D Cow, have I always worked as a lawyer in Japan? No, I have not. I've been checking your channel on and off for years. Thought I was a translator. I was never. Well, you know what? I've done translation through the years as when I worked in the Japanese insurance company. It was kind of one of my unofficial tasks as the only gaijin in the office. In fact, even in my first job as an IT engineer, when we had a foreign partner arrive, I had to interpret for him in meetings, which is like exhausting. You can't go back to programming after you interpret for a 2-hour meeting. Like, interpreters only interpret for like 20, 25 minutes at a time while eating chocolate because you burn up so many calories just from the brain working. I did it for like 2 hours straight at a time. And then I had to go back and go programming. It was impossible. So yeah, as a bilingual person, I've done translation. And at a law firm, I've done translation. Just because I've had to, at times. Even when you have a translation team, sometimes it's more efficient. But I've never actually worked as a translator. It's been part of the job, the work that I naturally do as a bilingual. By the way, multi-track audio. When we get multi-track audio, I'm looking forward to actually putting Japanese voice back over these things and doing some more Japanese videos again. You can hear me speak Japanese, but yeah. I've worked as a system engineer, I've worked as a policy consultant, and then I've worked as a lawyer at a law firm, and then I've worked as an in-house lawyer. That's been my progression over 24 years. Been in Japan since 1999, non-stop, and multiple times before that. So yeah, that's my journey. 3D Cal. Cedric D, good to see you. When in doubt, blame foreigners, indeed. Believe in yourself, good evening, good to see you there. Quentin Rankett, everything in the US is political, everything. Yeah, it's getting to be absurd, and it does make me worry. Like, is this how democracy ends? Just when everything becomes a debate? Like, part of democracy is electing people to make common sense decisions in the better interest of all of society. I don't think that's idealism. I think that's how, there's always been extremists and people who say stupid things, but I think that's always been the basic concept of how, democratic governance works. And lately it feels like it literally feels like a TV news, partisan debate, like just on everything, which is ridiculous and makes me think that that could lead to the entire system breaking down, which I hope it doesn't do, but that's what I worry about. So yeah. Hoi Guai, the anti-vax trend started many years before COVID, and it blew up as a political football during the pandemic. Indeed, there have always been people who have been against having their kids vaccinated, for example, and typically, very specific groups like Jehovah's Witnesses, New Age, people into like, my kid doesn't need to be vaccinated against smallpox because I have crystals and herbal remedies. And the society can tolerate a certain percent of people not being vaccinated if you have enough people getting vaccinated, and it's always been within those boundaries. But how that got co-opted, and it got co-opted through the bloody QAnon and the conspiracy theorists and everything, and got adopted into mainstream, is just so terrifying. If the idea that medicine can be co-opted as a political topic, and anything can be co-opted as a political topic, and that's terrifying. Which is a perfect segue to the final topic of the evening. There's an article here on Nippon.com on basically the history of how the Korean kind of quasi-Christian apocalyptic, messianic cult, the Unification Church, managed to get into the LDP hierarchy, which is through Abe's father, and then later through Abe, and basically offering people up to be able to work as campaign workers for LDP members, and offering all sorts of donations. And it wasn't just altruistic either. It wasn't, it was directly in exchange for having things like, family values and topics that they align themselves with being supported by the LDP, including the LGBT discrimination laws debate happening now. It's kind of funny. How would there be sort of Christian ethics based opposition to it when Japan is another Christian country, and it's because this cult in particular was paying money for those views, for those blockers to be in there, stopping anything from changing. As I pointed out on this, while yes, it's terrible and the Constitution prohibits religious participation in politics, there was another story here about. I didn't put in the topics how the founder of the Happy Science, the political party whose name is literally the Party for the Realization of Happiness, the founder of that political party, who is the head of an extreme apocalyptic Buddhist cult that advocates for Japan getting nuclear weapons and using them immediately on China and Russia, and instigating World War III, through which Japan will take over the world. The Happy Science Party, he died tonight. But again, there are these fringe clown groups who should be constitutionally prohibited from even participating in politics, because if religious groups are not supposed to participate. But if you're worried about the LDP and political parties of all, cooperating with religious cults, there's a big one in Japan, much bigger than the Unification Church, and they have a whole political party unofficially. And they do campaigning directly for other parties as well. And, while I wouldn't say that their policy agenda is as toxic as you see, all the same problems. And it's kind of funny because they're so influential that media doesn't even want to name them or talk about them because they're worried about getting cancelled by this group. And look, I know people from SG. I have friends who have families. I mean, it's unavoidable. I think the numbers are 15% of the Japanese population is either directly in or has a family member in Soka Gakkai. And just from that alone, they're just enormously influential. And if you piss them off, you get into a lot of trouble. Focusing on the Unification Church, a Korean cult with the same size as Jehovah's Witnesses basically in Japan. And kind of similar. It's easy to sort of pick on them as a small group and as a foreign sort of a church with many Japanese members, of course. But the only thing that frustrates me about this, I agree with everything they're saying, except why are you only saying it about this one church when there are other groups that are more influential that are doing much more. If you want to really treat this as an issue, treat it as an issue. That's my opinion. Anyway, that is all the news topics I've had. As usual, I'm a little bit over time. Where am I at? Where's the timer? I can't see the timer on the screen. 1 minute 5:55. As usual, 5 minutes over. I thought I wouldn't even get this far, actually, because I haven't been tweeting that much. Remember, you can follow me on Twitter. I'll continue doing learnings of Seattle for greater betterment of Japan and rest of world. Continuing to enjoy life in America. But pretty full on. I'm really glad I got my driver's license. So I thought I might go out and drive this weekend, but I ended up not doing that. But I'm getting around. I think I'm going to try to get out of Seattle next weekend anyway and actually drive around and explore. So if you are around Seattle and you'd like to meet up, my social calendar is open. So definitely hit me up on any of the socials, Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter, the best ones. You can message me. I'll definitely be up for a coffee with anyone interested. I'm definitely going to be looking to do trips, certainly into Oregon and hopefully Canada at some point as well. But yeah, anyone in town, let me know. Remember, wherever you are, to stay safe. I'll sort out and I'll tweet when I realize what time this is going to be next week. But there will be a time shift again next week, which I apologize for, particularly for people in the southern hemisphere where the shift is like that, where it's going completely opposite. So we'll sort that out. But look, everybody have a good week. Remember, keep following me on Twitter. Take care of yourselves. And yeah, Slake Manson. How many Starbucks around where I live? Not that many. It's kind of funny. People in Seattle, and I find this, the Starbucks in Japan is much better than the Starbucks that I've had in Seattle. And there's such consistently good quality coffee everywhere. And Seattleites are such kind of coffee connoisseurs. I wouldn't say snobs, actually. They just know what good coffee is, and good coffee is everywhere. And there are some famously good coffee places, like within 200 meters of where I am. There's like 3 or 4 famously great coffee places. No, there's no real reason to go to. The only reason you go to a Starbucks is you're desperate for a coffee and you don't have time to walk the extra 100 meters to a better coffee place because you got to get one in a pinch. So you go to Starbucks. But yeah, it's not that great. There's a lot of great coffee here. Hoi guai, at this point, the number one denomination in the US is agnostic atheist, but you never know it. Indeed, yeah, it's weird, isn't it? And look, and as I've always said, I've got no problem with people being religious at all, like in anything. Just don't be an a-hole. That's all you got to do. And most of them aren't. So I don't know how all this gets co-opted, but I hope it gets fixed. Anyway, have a good week, everybody. Stay safe. I will talk to you same time next week, and boom, peace. Apologies for loud speaking and New Zealand accent to all the people listening in the other buildings, but kind of fun that I can speak loud. I'm going to go back to singing and dancing like nobody's watching, although I'll have to stop the stream to make sure that's actually true. I'll see you all later. Have a good week, everyone. Peace.